Welcome to Creating the Future Live. And our focus in this episode is about art and design. And we've got a really excellent guest called Hiwez. And we're going to interview him in a few moments. But first of all, let's see some of his work, please. Wow, that's fantastic. They look really brilliant. So tell us a bit what we saw. What's in the products we saw there on that video?
That was a good medley, actually. Some of them were personal products, some of them were just a bit of fun, and there were a few client pieces in there as well. So we saw some of the bunnies. There was a bunny with like a rocket launcher, I think. That was a good blend, actually. That was a personal project that I did for fun, and then it turned out to be a product with a client because they just loved it, and we worked together to bring it to physical reality. There was also a COVID buster, so it's quite on point at the moment. Ghostbusters themed chameleon that I do a series with a client in Germany called Patch Lab, and yeah, we did a kind of Ghostbusters themed COVID creature with the chameleon in the kind of typical Ghostbusters gear, but just avoiding all, major logos and anything that would be intellectual property. Yeah.
That's great. So, what do you call yourself? Do you call yourself a designer? How do you describe your work?
So I typically call myself an illustrator to try and appear a little bit more grown up, but mainly it's cartoonist, I would say. Yeah, definitely a cartoonist.
And on a day-to-day basis, what's that entail? What do you do on an average sort of day, if there's an average day?
Yeah, there isn't really an average day. It's quite different day to day, week to week. It depends what kind of clients I've got going and what kind of personal projects I've got going on. The Tactical Teddies brand that I'm slowly growing is one of the more permanent things. So I guess on a week to week basis, I usually try and do either some Tactical Teddy product illustrations or work on a couple of comics I've got going on and a card game, and then splice it up throughout the week with some client work and work with some really fun people.
So that it sounds like you've got what I'd call a portfolio career. You do a whole range of different things with a theme to it. Do you have a company? You're self-employed. What's your current status?
I'm self-employed. I call myself Hiwez Illustrations online. I do most of my business and my conversations tend to start with clients on things like Instagram and Facebook. So I'm kind of a social media portfolio character, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm guessing that you didn't suddenly arrive at this point in your career. I'm really interested to know, in a potted version of, how did you get to where you've got to? What's your career pathway been to get to this point?
Well, I've always done some form of illustration, whether it's been sketching in the margins of my maths book and English book and any other like creative course thing, and then in college and university it was definitely design focused. I attended South Downs College and I did art and design and photography, and then I went to the University of Portsmouth and I did a graphic design course there. I did apply for an illustration course, but I got turned away because my artwork was too childish. And they said, go and do a foundation course, and if you still want to do illustration at the end, then we'll reconsider it. And I ended up taking graphic design just because it seemed to be the more sensible route. Graphic design had a lot of promise to it, like you'd leave university and there'd be lots of graphic design roles. And then it ended up being that that wasn't the case at all. Jobs were really sparse in 2009 everywhere, various different courses. And so, yeah, we had a bit of a hard time coming out of uni. But since then, it's always been design related. So I worked at a print house, and then I worked at the head office of Game in Basingstoke. Then I did a little bit of freelance, and then had a role at Kuzai marketing agency. That was the best job I ever had. I actually had illustration in my job title for the first time. And then, yeah, just sort of like went into illustration a little bit more hardcore after that. After it was in my job title, I think it gave me a real taste for it. I found a community in my hobby, my other hobby, which was airsoft at the time, which is like a kind of paintball meets Nerf guns running around in the woods thing. So I started drawing a lot of that. And then, yeah, since then, my community really grew from there, I think. So, yeah, I've always been sketching.
And can I ask you, was there any one person or people that inspired you in the first place to look for a career in art and design?
It's something that I've always wanted to do, I know that much. So it was always encouraging to see other people doing it, but I don't think that that it was ever any one particular person. Very recently, I think there's some people who encouraged me to still do it, because things are, like, as we know, with the state of the world at the moment, people are very hesitant to invest in things like illustration. It seems like quite a fun side thing for some companies. Other companies are fine to invest in that, but there's a few artists out there definitely that are involved in their own niches. Jake Parker is one of them. He actually did something that encouraged a lot of artists to try and find their niche and try and get involved in art a lot more in a fun way, or if they were already doing it as a career, which I was, to try and find the fun in it again, because sometimes you can get kind of caught up in the monotony of it. So he created something called Inktober, I think 5 years ago or so now. So every October, there is an artist's challenge online, #Inktober. You can find it out. There are prompts, so you'll get, I think it's 31 days of prompts, and you have to draw something with ink and paper. So it's sort of like bringing things really back to the monologue of art. And it was during that time that I actually drew a couple of teddy bears who were about to like breach a door, and it just got a result that I'd never seen before on Instagram. People loved it. So since then, I started doing tactical teddies, essentially illustrations. So I've really got Jake Parker to thank, I think, for that. There's a few other artists there, Alan Stewart, Derek Loffman, who did a fun Spider Pig comic, and he does stuff with Marvel. It's quite a big name. And Cam Kendall. All of those artists do cartoons, in my opinion. So, and they're adults, like grown adults drawing cartoons, and that's it's just really nice to see.
So it sounds to me like you've got a career that you really enjoy, which has to be important. It sounds like other guests we've spoken to, many of them have sort of said, from my point of view, there's loads of talent. You're clearly talented. It's hard work, because jobs are hard work. How much of this is to do with luck, do you think?
I think a lot of it's to do with like good fortune, like we've said, a series of fortunate events, and knowing, having the foresight, I think, to see when a fortunate event is occurring, to be able to nurture it, see who's involved, and keep those relationships growing, or the skill growing if it's something that you're just discovering for the first time. So I think it's a bit of luck and a lot of fortune and a lot of hard work as well.
Okay, good. So it sounds like your career, your job is great. It's fun. It's challenging. What would you say are one or two of the best things about your career? And maybe to balance it, maybe one or two things, or one thing that's less good about the work you have to do. So a couple
Yeah.
of great things and one of the negative things.
Okay, yeah, a couple of great things is being able to choose your working hours, so long as you've got the discipline and yeah, accountability ingrained in you. Because I think it's very easy when you've got your own time to go off the rails a bit and think, I'll do it later, I'll do it later, I'll do it later. But because you're doing what you enjoy so much, hopefully what you love, I don't even think about it as work. It's just something I like to sit down. It's what I would be doing when I wasn't working back in the day. I would come home and I would just sit down and it would be illustration. But now that's every day. So that's a huge positive. And the other thing is being able to produce things that I'm proud of. And are also mine a lot of the time. If I'm not working with clients and I'm growing the tactical teddies or the bunnies or anything that's just a bit of fun that brings me joy, it's nice to have a product or a result at the end that I can show off and I'm really happy with.
And the negative or the less positive things?
Less positive things. The most challenging thing I've found is being everything. In the beginning, at least, you're the marketing department, the head of social media, your payroll, you're the accountants, your head of purchasing and distribution. You have to go down to the post office and send the stuff. And I take a lot of joy in all of the individual things, not so much the accountancy. I don't have accountants to do that for me. But when it can be quite exhausting, I think, like you don't expect to be doing the thing. You think you're going to go and do the thing you love, and I'll be drawing all the time, for example. And actually, still, that's very little amount of the time. I'm doing a lot of illustration work in what still could be considered my spare time, but it's sort of taking me into the evening sometimes, and you've got to end up, packaging things and emailing various people. There's a lot of admin. That's one of the negatives. The other one is there are no sick days when you're working for yourself, and that's something that really hits home when you are ill for the first time, and it dawns on you that if you start to have a couple of slow months, that can be quite a kick, quite an impact, to realise you are in charge really of getting the bills every month. That's quite scary. So there's a lot of admin to take into consideration, but at the end of the day, you are your own boss. Or actually, you're more like a very relaxed head of department, because for me, I have a lot of clients and they're really all my bosses still. But as long as the work gets done, everybody's happy and you can carry on enjoying what you love to do.
Very good. I think my final question really is, for anyone who might be watching this, have you a top tip or top tips you might offer to young people thinking they'd like a career in art and design?
I did have a think about this, because there's so much that I would love to give advice-wise, like being, I think, 3 years into freelance now. One of my major tips, if you already know what you want to do, and if art and design, illustration is your thing, then really it's looking after yourself. It's not what you might expect, because you'll find your own style and find your own way of working eventually. It might, it will come organically. But something that I didn't expect to hit a wall of is various creaks and clicking and stuff like that starts to happen when you are repeating a very small something as refined as illustration. You're going to be risking carpal tunnel. Your elbow is going to be on the table a lot. What I would, if it was going to be one thing I would recommend, it's get one of these. This is a wrist gel squidgy that you would normally, if you were using a mouse frequently, I use it for my elbow, and that has saved a lot of trouble right the way up my arm. It takes a lot of pressure off. So you can end up illustrating for anywhere in the region of 7 to 11 to 12 hours. If you're doing what you love, time melts away. And if you're sitting in the same position for most of the day, you're damaging something. So yeah, would be my top tip would be look after yourself, because art can be very corrosive.
If you'd like to ask a question, remember, follow the link below. But I'd like to express my thanks to Hiwez for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see him again at the panel discussion later. Thank you very much.
A pleasure.